Hey everyone, welcome to Logan's Mosh Pit. Glad to have you here. Do me a favor and please subscribe if you haven't already. Today we're going to do another episode of the Memory Lane series. In this series, we're going to take a look back at some interesting articles and interviews from old guitar magazines. My dad has been collecting guitar magazines for about 30 years now. He saved a bunch of them. He was kind enough to let me borrow some. Today we got the October 1999 issue of Guitarist Magazine. Here's the cover. I want to read you an article written by Sandy Masuo. In this article, Marty Friedman of Megadeth describes his exuberant evolution as a guitar player. So, let's turn it over to Marty Friedman. Marty Friedman has just returned from a guitar workshop at the Guitar Center in West Hollywood, a hop, skip, and jump from the Whiskey A Go-Go. As Megadeth's main axeman for the past 10 years, Friedman is in the privileged position of playing for a band that has balanced critical success and commercial appeal. But even in his formative years, he had a mind to have his cake and eat it too. I was a real smartass in junior high school, he recalls over an early lunch at his hotel. I was already playing guitar, but I thought, why don't I just take a guitar class, 'cause I'll definitely get an A in it. It's a beginning class. I'll just spend the hour practicing in the corner. But the teacher was hip to that, and she made me teach the class. She's like, you're not going to sit there and practice for this hour. You're going to teach the class. So I had to teach people G chords, and it was a bummer. Nowadays, Friedman conducts guitar seminars, and what once bummed him out constitutes his only practice regimen outside of playing with Megadeth. I sit in front of a bunch of people and just improvise and answer questions. That's practice, he says, and his advice to budding players is to similarly put yourself on the spot and get in front of people. The best way to learn is to put yourself right on the firing line. When you're growing up, you've got to spend a certain amount of time in your bedroom learning what the instrument does, but being in a band is way more valuable to your guitar technique, to just being a person, dealing with other people, and making music. Of course, Friedman mastered the nuts and bolts of playing a long time ago. The challenges he faces these days are more metaphysical, revolving around issues of inspiration and expression. Technology, new and old, is among the least of his concerns. While recording Megadeth's latest Risk in Nashville, he admits he was tempted by the many fine vintage instruments the local guitar shops had to offer, but ultimately couldn't believe that any guitar was worth the high prices they commanded. When pressed, he confesses that he owns quite a few guitars, and the most of the lot is a Gretsch, though he's quick to add that he made sure his own signature Jackson model, the KE1, was equally cool, so he'd be able to play the most guitar every night. In fact, most of the guitars he owns are KE1s. That way, he's always working with the same palette of sounds, and no matter where his travels with Megadeth take him, he knows if anything happens to his equipment, he could replace his guitar with an off-the-rack KE1 without having to do much tweaking to get the sound right. Risk features an impressive range of guitar sounds, from subtle, the lush moodiness of Wanderlust, to exotic, the Jerry Jones sitar effect on Insomnia, and bombastic, the menacing drive of The Doctor's Calling. The diversity, according to Friedman, is the product of a lot of methodical studio experimentation with whatever resources were available, from session musicians who added strings to the mix to an arsenal of hardware. Sometimes just our guitars were enough, he explains. We got a lot of different, unique sounds this time. Sometimes just changing the guitar sound by itself was enough to add personality. You don't need to fill it up with big orchestrations. We did that. We did everything. We added stuff and we left some stuff bare. We used every combination of everything. For the main feature parts, I used my main live rig because I'm going to have to play it live, so I didn't want to stray from that for the main parts. I have my own model Jackson guitar, basically an Explorer shape with the volume knob far away, and Crate Voodoo and Black Voodoo amps. Those actually give me a very straight-ahead rock sound. Compared to a Les Paul and Marshall, it's maybe a little bit more modern sounding, to my ear anyway. For the most part, we started there, and then we moved off that to freak the sound out a little bit more. We used effects sometimes, and we just had boxes and boxes of effects. My effects, producer Dan Huff's effects, and the engineer's effects. So it was like being a kid in a candy store, with hundreds of effects that we went through one at a time until we found something that fit the song. Sometimes it was frustrating because it took so many hours before you could play your part. By the time you get the sound you like, you're so bored of the part that you really need to get some fresh air. You can plug through so many different rigs and so many different sounds, your ear just loses the concept of what it is you're doing. That's the hardest part of playing. You have to be inspired when you play, but sometimes finding the right sound takes so much time that you lose your inspiration. This is precisely why Friedman likes to keep things simple outside the studio. I've always wanted to plug straight into an amp and that way eliminate anything that could go wrong. 'Cause I'm a bonehead when it comes to technical things, he continues. My whole idea of playing is to play without thinking and just emote. And not have to worry about, oh, is my digital delay set to X number of milliseconds and all that. Even from a very young age, I tried to play as straight as possible, so I could play through anybody's rig if I wanted. I'm a real basic into pedals kind of guy, so that's what I use in my live rig. A bunch of pedals and my guitar tech runs them from backstage as I play. It also looks cooler when you're all of a sudden going from clean to lead and like you're not doing anything. You're just standing there playing. It's like, he's God. My tech is also extremely musical. His timing is way better than mine is, so he can switch things on time. If I had the pedals in front of me, I'd be running across the stage, trying to make it on beat 4 or beat 5 or whatever, and I'd never be able to do it. So that's a big deal for me. I use foot pedals in the studio too, so I can do it live. The two heads are better than one approach Friedman takes with his guitar techs may seem like a shortcut, the guitar equivalent of opting for an automatic transmission over a standard, but it takes him one step closer to his intuitive playing ideal, filling a gap between today's technology and future possibilities. Someday, a computer chip implant might enable a player to switch on distortion, delay, or reverb at the touch of a thought. My guitar tech knows my playing so well it's practically like that, Friedman says. One day I was testing an effect or something and he was saying, you know, this would probably sound better if you moved your right hand a half an inch to the right toward the bridge as you played it. He wasn't even watching me. He was just listening to the monitor. And that helps me because I don't like to think about anything but the music. And if I can avoid any kind of technical details, then that's the way I need to go. Yet the focus on music doesn't mean athletic displays of technique interest Friedman any more than the technicalities of playing. He's focusing more on songs these days. Dave Mustaine remains Megadeth's primary songwriter, but Friedman is becoming more and more interested in the craftsmanship of music. Musicianship is the least important thing of all, he ventures. I mean, musicians are like plumbers. You can hire them. Take the Spice Girls, for example. They're average singers. The songwriting is why they're selling the records. Those songs stick in your head, and they're perfect for their audience. The audience just loves them. I mean, I know a lot of wonderful players who are holes, drug addicts, complete losers, but that's just one cog in the machinery of making music. And I think a lot of guitar players think guitar is the be-all and end-all. Being good at being in a band is a much more valuable asset, I think, than technical proficiency. Of course, being both is best, but being in a band, you can't trade that. You can't do without it. That said, he's not denigrating the need for rip-roaring fretwork. It's just important to keep it in its place. It's an element that will make a good collection of songs into a great one. But, Friedman stresses, it's only part of the big picture. You can't save a bad song with a great solo, he says. But on the other hand, as a lead guitar player, I don't like to say that the song is so important that the solo doesn't matter. I try to follow somewhat in Brian May's footsteps so that the solo can be a wonderful place in the middle of the song, like a window you go through and come out in a new, cool place. That's the end of the article. Let me know what you guys thought of the Marty Friedman article in the comments. That does it for today's video, guys. I hope you enjoyed. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe if you haven't already. I really appreciate the support. I'll see you next time. Until then, rock on.